In this video, I'll be discussing H-infinity optimal adaptive noise cancellation for the removal of ocular artifacts from electroencephalography. Electroencephalography, or electrical signals produced by the brain and measured at the scalp, has been heavily researched in neuroscience for many applications. The pros of this signal modality includes the fact that it's non-invasive, or no surgery is required to measure this electrical activity, and that it's very easy to collect as compared to other signal modalities. The cons for this signal modality is that it has a high presence of physiological artifacts, such as eye blink artifacts or motion artifacts. It has a relatively low signal to noise ratio, and it has to deal with volume conduction, which is the fact that electrodes are measured on outside of the skull. The signals have to pass from the source within the brain through brain matter in the skull to get to the electrodes. Ocular artifacts, or electrical signals produced during blinking or eye movement, contaminate EEG and are one of the most difficult artifacts to remove. This is true because ocular artifacts are stochastic, time varying. The signal is mixed due to volume conduction. The noise profile is dependent on the position of EEG electrodes, and the frequency of certain movements, including eye blinks, is dependent on the task with which this signal is being collected. Common methods for the removal of ocular artifacts include independent component analysis, principal component analysis, neural network base removal, and adaptive noise cancellation. Figure 3 presents the overall general system diagram for adaptive noise cancellation. Here we have two inputs, the signal source and the noise source. The signal source is made up of two components, the true EEG signal and the noise signal, overall channels. For input into the filter, we need a representation of the noise, which must be correlated, obviously, with the noise, the underlying noise itself, but uncorrelated with the signal. This noise reference is passed through the adaptive filter, which then applies weights and outputs a noise estimate. This estimate is removed from the contaminated signal, and which outputs the signal estimate. Based on the error between the noise estimate and noise source, we then update our weights in the adaptive filter to produce a better estimate of the noise. The pros of this framework is that no statistical characteristics of the noise source is needed, but the cons is that you necessarily need noise representation. For EOG removal, we get this representation of the noise by placing 4 EOG electrodes around the eyes. And then since it has to be uncorrelated with the signal, we subtract the top from the bottom electrodes and the right from the left electrodes, which removes the common neural signals and amplifies the noise source itself. Another con for this method is that it relies quite heavily on the adaptive filter to update weights, which then produces a noise estimate, and is also susceptible to model uncertainties. H-infinity optical control methods have been proposed for the optimization of the filter weights due to its ability to handle model uncertainties. Here I present the state space model with which the signal S follows, as well as the weight optimization algorithm itself. In the weight optimization, P is the noise covariance, which is updated iteratively. So no previously known characteristics of the noise are necessary since this updates by itself. Most of the effort in the design of the H-infinity adaptive filters and the selection of the following two parameters. Rho reflects the speed at which the weights vary in time, and epsilon reflects the maximum amount of energy a disturbance can add to the signal estimation. This equation describes that statement, where T of S is the transfer function that describes the contributions of an individual disturbance on the total energy that can be added to the estimated signal. But basically what it boils down to is that H-infinity adaptive filters work to minimize the worst case scenario in regards to a disturbance's effect on the signal estimation by limiting the maximum amount of energy a disturbance can add to the system. At the University of Houston's non-invasive brain-machine interface lab, we've worked to set some upper limits on these parameters with channel-wise constrained optimization methods. Here we can see the real-time removal of EOG artifacts from EEG. Notice how the EOG artifact profile is different as you move further away from the EOG measurements, but the algorithm is still able to remove these in real time. For further information on this H-infinity adaptive scheme, please see these references